Hi, everyone. I'm Karen from Environmental Defense. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. We'll just, I guess, maybe give one more minute to allow people to join so that they know what we're doing here. Really happy that you've joined us and looking forward to a really good discussion tonight about how we can hopefully stop this incinerator proposal. Okay, it looks like we do have a critical mass at this point. Alessia, should we go ahead and get started?
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Thank you. So welcome everyone to this community meeting to stop the expansion of the Brampton Incinerator. My name is Karen Wersig and I am the Senior Program Manager for Plastics at Environmental Defense. Also hosting this meeting are the Toronto Environmental Alliance, which has been involved in successful campaigns to stop incineration of Toronto waste, and three local community groups, the Brampton Environmental Alliance, the Sierra Club of Peel, and the Community Climate Council. And you'll hear from each of these co-hosts in a few minutes. We're holding this meeting on the long-standing territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and the treaty territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. I'll just run quickly through our proposed agenda. What we found out about the incinerator and the impacts, I'm going to just present a little bit about the incinerator proposal and the impacts that this is likely to have on the community. Emily will talk about, from the Toronto Environmental Alliance, we'll talk about how we think the incinerator expansion can be stopped. Steve from Sierra Club Peel will explain what they've been doing so far to alert local politicians about the issue. Julian from Brampton Environmental Alliance will give a bit of overview about Brampton Environmental Alliance and what they're up to. And then Supreet from the Community Climate Council will also discuss what they're planning and how you can get more involved in the local struggle. Feel free to put any questions in the chat as we go. We have Maria Guillen with us this evening from the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, and she has promised to help put resources in the chat about incineration and alternatives to it as we go if people have really technical questions in the chat. But I'll also, Alessia and I will monitor and make sure that things get addressed if we need to as we go answer questions in the chat. But then there'll be plenty of time in the agenda for discussion on next steps, because we do plan by 7:30 to break into two groups on specific topics. And I'll talk a bit about that later. And the idea with breaking out into those groups is just to come up with some plans and ideas on how to move this forward with the people we have in the group. So we hope you'll pick a group when it comes time and share some ideas and get involved in the planning there. Then we'll make that plan in each group for next steps and come back and report to the bigger group, to each other, really, because it's just two groups, so that we can reconfirm what we're going to do next. So I'll just start quickly by outlining what the proposal is that is before us and why it concerns us. Really what we're dealing with is it's a 30-year-old incinerator that has been at 7656 Bramley Road in Brampton for 30 years. It's privately owned. It's gone through a series of different owners and is currently permitted to burn 182,000 tons of mixed waste per year. And the source of that waste is about 60% waste from businesses, including industry and like big commercial businesses. I believe the airport is still, the Greater Toronto Airports Authority is still a client. There may be other large businesses like that send their waste to Emerald. But the bigger problem is that Emerald is proposing to expand to 900,000 tons per year, which would be the biggest incinerator in Canada. Go to the next slide, please. So what are our concerns? A group of us sent a collective letter to Emerald as part of the process, as part of the environmental screening process, noting that Brampton and Peel are already very much burdened with significant air pollution. And that's true because of all the transportation in Peel, the airport, of course, and all the highways and all the logistics, but also because of the heavy burden from industry and actually energy generation, especially the gas plant and this incinerator. Burning waste, though, produces particular pollutants and some of the most toxic carcinogenic pollutants known to humans, dioxins and furans, that don't exist before you burn the waste. So this is a specific byproduct of burning waste that we're particularly concerned about. And the waste burned at Emerald is it's fully unsorted or uncharacterized. It comes to Emerald just in big bins, and it contains a lot of recyclables and compostables, even according to the company. What we also know is that alternatives to incineration are cheaper and safer for the environment and our health. And most of the alternatives involve reducing the amount of stuff that people need to put in the garbage pail in the first place. And so that means increasing reuse and reducing packaging, for example, where possible, ensuring that organics can be treated and composted and they don't have to be burned or buried in a landfill. And, going to zero plastic waste, for example, as the federal government would like to do. All of these types of programs that would encourage less generation of garbage in the first place are much cheaper and safer for the environment. Next slide, please. In their own study, the company identified that there is already existing dangerous air pollution that is above what it should be, according to Ontario guidelines, in the area around the incinerator. Benzo A pyrene is one example. It's already 125% of what it should be around the incinerator. It's a known carcinogen. And hydrochloric acid, which contributes to smog, is already 375% more than it should be in the area around the incinerator. And of course, expanding the incinerator by more than 5 times will only make that worse. The incinerator also contributes to greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, if it expanded to its full proposed size, it would produce nearly 1 million million tons of greenhouse gases per year, and that would represent about 9% of what is currently generated in Peel region. So it's an enormous share of the carbon budget, the greenhouse gas budget in Peel region. Next slide, please. The previous slide was the background, the existing background air pollution in the area around the incinerator. The company has also projected that if they are allowed to expand to 900,000 tons, nitrogen dioxides would increase to 128% of the air quality criteria in Ontario. Very dangerous for respiratory health, a cause of asthma and other respiratory distress, as well as longer-term lung health problems. And then even that very toxic thing I talked about at the beginning, dioxins and furans, which are carcinogenic and endocrine disruptors, meaning they affect our development, they affect our ability to have children, they affect our brain development in small children. And those would also be above the percentage of air quality. This is according to Emerald's own study. This is not something we've made up. The company is actually acknowledging this. So I think that's my last slide, and I would like to just pass it now to Emily to continue on the way we've decided to fight this, the way we're fighting this so far, and really where we think the opportunities are in the future. So go ahead, Emily.
Thanks, Karen. Hi, everyone. So my name's Emily. I am the waste campaigner for the Toronto Environmental Alliance, or T. And we have been fighting against incineration and fighting for zero waste for more than 35 years. And we have been opposing incineration every time it comes up in the city of Toronto and there's talk about building an incinerator. We are there to point out that there are so many better ways we can deal with our waste. And we don't want to burn garbage in Toronto, and we don't want to burn garbage we don't want our neighbors to be burning garbage, right? We don't think anyone should have to take this garbage from across Ontario and burn it right there in their community. So I'm really happy to, share some of our experience with this. Right now, unfortunately, one of the complexities of this issue is that the Emerald Energy from Waste facility, or the Emerald Incinerator, is a privately owned facility. And so there is not, sometimes when there are battles against incinerators, it's a community talking to their own municipal government saying, we don't want an incinerator in our community. We think we can do better to recycle and dissort our waste. But right now, this is just a private company that's making profit because they take garbage from municipalities across the province, even beyond, and they take a whole lot of commercial garbage and they burn it there. So they are a profit-making business, and the municipality does not actually have a lot of control over this. This is one of the reasons why we need to have community members rise up and sort of say, like, hold on a minute, whose garbage is this and why are we burning it? And why are we breathing garbage from across Ontario in our community? So as we understand, the environmental assessment process has been really gutted by the existing government. There has been a lot of efforts to sort of streamline environmental assessment. So the environmental assessment process is really where there's an independent review of the environmental and health impacts of proposed major projects. The Environmental Assessment Act has been really streamlined in the interest of making things, cutting red tape, to make it really easy for some projects to move ahead. And unfortunately, the Environmental Assessment Act regarding this waste facility says that incineration can just kind of go ahead. Sorry, there's some dogs barking outside. I don't know if you guys can hear that. My microphone sometimes picks funny things up. The Environmental Assessment Act basically says Emeralds can do their own assessment of their own issues and their own, like assessment of health and whatever impacts, and submit that to the province. And then the province can just say, looks good, without having an independent, provincially run environmental assessment. So to me, that is frightening. It is really concerning that this sort of independent review of what is going on and what is being proposed for this facility won't happen. Also, the proponent, Emerald, was required to host community meetings. And I don't know about any of you here, but I know there's very little public participation in those meetings. The Emerald reports about this said they had about a dozen people at each of the 3 open houses, including municipal staff and some of their customers. So if you have an incinerator in a very dense community that's slated for a lot of future growth and a meeting with just 12 people, I don't think that is really reasonable community consultation. So our focus today and our hope here is to really talk about what can the community do. And while this isn't a municipally owned incinerator and it isn't a municipally owned facility, we strongly believe that the community has a lot of power and can make your concerns heard to your local councillors, to your local MPs, and to your local regional councillors, because it's their job to represent you and to think about what your community looks like. And, do you want this kind of a facility in your community? So while the local council does not have any sort of final decision-making say, as far as we understand it, they can have a lot of influence. This is something that's really important. So that's my main points. Unless Karen, you thought there was something else that should be mentioned. That's it. And we'll talk about other things, and we can break out into groups more and talk about strategy.
Yeah, I guess just to, the headline is, we need to get this word to the provincial minister of the environment that we do not want this expansion by the end of the summer. That really is our key priority, because she ultimately will decide whether this can go ahead the way they proposed it or whether more study needs to happen, which just gives us more time to organize and more time to get more information, and more time to work on alternatives. Thanks, Emily. I'm going to now introduce Steve Kirby from the Sierra Club Peel to just talk about what your group's been doing in terms of chatting with meeting with local politicians, and maybe you want to talk about what's happening tomorrow.
Well, there we go. That's a good intro for sure. So yeah, I'm Steve Kirby. I'm actually a professional chemist and business man, and I live in Brampton. I've worked a little bit with a couple of the councillors there. So we approached them a while ago, boots on the ground approach. And actually Julian also came with me. So thank you very much. And so we went and met with Deputy Mayor Singh and Regional Councillor Tor, who happen to be my councillors, and we just talked to them and said, listen, this is insane. We have no input, and they're also very concerned. So they agreed to help put us on the agenda of the council meeting tomorrow. So that'll be one of the big events, will be Brampton City Council. Getting to this has been a little bit of work, to say the least. We did create a small response team, I like to call it, where we're small but mighty. And one of my goals here is to hopefully come away with other like-minded folks who would like to join our committee and team, and to try to pressure not just our local politicians, but also at the provincial, and I don't know, maybe even federal now with Bill 226 just coming out. I don't know. We'll have to talk about that, I guess, as well. So the big news is we're presenting at Brampton City Council. As mentioned earlier, Brampton City Council can't make a decision on this. This place already exists. It's already zoned. They already have a permit. So they're trying to get a permit to expand. So our goal here is to try to get the council to support us and write a letter to the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks saying that they oppose this. And we've also reached out locally as well to Peel Health as well, because they actually had some concerns as well when they responded to the screening report as well. So there is some interest here, specifically on the dioxins and furans. As mentioned, are very toxic, and we should not take them lightly. And I'd actually be curious. One of the things I keep trying to bring up with folks, I tried doing it over at the Emerald Public Liaison meeting, but it got shot down pretty quickly, was what, do you do any soil testing? Because I'd like to know, if they've been there 32 years, how much contamination is there in the first place before we start building, right? So the first stage is to try Brampton City, and then we were going to also delegate at Peel, which would be the 11th. We're going to try to get on that as well. We're trying to use, at least myself, because I know some of the folks at Brampton, is to use that as kind of a trial balloon, so to speak, to see how it goes and see what we can get out of them as deliverables. I did attend the 4th Emerald Open House in December, by the way. I was the only one there when I signed in, and I got there right on time, and I had time to walk around and talk to everybody and leave, and I was still the only one signed in. So they had about, I'd say probably about 20 consultants there, maybe 25, including some of the employees. And don't kid yourself, they put on a good show. They really lead people to believe that this is fabulous. You take garbage, you create energy. What more could you ask for, right? But it's not as simple as that. And the devil's always in the details. And that's what we have to bring to people's attention. I know Julian is also doing a lot of work right now. He's working with the Etobicoke Climate Action. I don't know if they're there today, but if they are, I would really like you to come to our breakout group #1, because I'd like to pick your brains to see what we can get out of you. So we know this is a provincial government decision, so we have to put pressure on the actual MPPs. We've had zero success with this. They haven't reached out. I got one phone back at one point from mine, MPP Grewal, and then he ghosted me after that. So it hasn't been too successful. So maybe with more of us, putting more pressure on them and demanding meetings, maybe we can get, in front of them. And again, I'm not sure about federal, but I did reach out to Mr. Sidhu, who's our MP here. He's a Liberal MP, and I did not get a response from him either. But oddly enough, him and Grewal share an office in the same building, basically. So maybe I'll stop by. So that's kind of what we've been doing from boots on the ground, and it hasn't been alone. The BEA has helped us a lot, and David Lang, Julian, Amisha. There's been a whole bunch of people, Isabella, the other Steve. All of these folks have really stepped up for us, and we appreciate it.
Great, thanks, Stephen. More time to talk about that politician strategy in group #2, and that looks like a good throw to Julian, who's going to just give a little overview about Brampton Environmental Alliance and what you've been up to. So go ahead, Julian.
Huge privilege to be one of the youth speaking here. Thank you all for the time you've given to be here. And Brian, it was so nice to see your face. Brian and I have been communicating via Instagram for the last month, and we're finally having our first meeting. So anyways, the Brampton Environmental Association, very powerful example of real people trying to do good things for their community. The Brampton Environmental Alliance is really an advocacy group. Its goal is to develop and support collective actions on public education regarding anything that can make the Brampton community more sustainable. I had the pleasure of meeting David at the Brampton Career Fair, where he was sharing how youth could get involved. But really, it's a place where anyone who cares about their community and the environment can donate their time. Some of the BEA's current initiatives include, obviously, Emerald, the Lily Roberts Park cleanup, as well as bringing awareness to the fact that the federal government withdrew from 413 and other environmental assessment requirements, where, you know, someone such as David, with his expertise and a breadth of understanding, helps community members understand the root of environmental issues, much the opposite of what Emerald is doing, trying to pull the wool over our eyes. So if you have an extra moment, the BEA, I'm sure, would love you to come out to one of its tree planting initiatives or to read its newsletter, and I can provide the link for that in the chat. That's a little bit about the BEA.
Thanks so much, Julian. And finally, we have, last but not least, Sukhpreet from the Community Climate Council in Peel, which is also a youth-led, youth kind of organized organization. And so go ahead, Sukhpreet.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'll just wait for a second for the slides to come up here. Great. So I'm here representing the Community Climate Council, or CCC is what we go by. Next slide, please. We are a youth-founded organization working on issues based in Peel region. Next slide, please. And we kind of target issues of climate literacy. We want to engage our community, and we also want to engage on the political level through delegations and things. So CCC is quite active, but when it comes to what we're doing with the incinerator, next slide, please. Next slide, please, Alicia. Thank you. We have three kind of main ways that we're looking at spreading awareness when it comes to the incinerator. So our first main idea is to kind of host pop-up informative events. So we'd like to be targeting community events. There's an upcoming community event with pollinator planting here in Brampton at Fred Klein Park. But we'd also like to target other events, any litter cleanups, any tree planting events. And I think these would be good opportunities for us to kind of connect with local active people within the community. And it'd be a good opportunity for us to hand out flyers, have discussions with locals who are already involved with climate action, environmental action, and have discussions with people on the ground. Next slide, please. Our second main way of targeting the incinerator and spreading awareness is by hosting a social media campaign. So what we'd like to do is to post weekly related to the incinerator. These could be polls trying to understand what the general population's kind of understanding is when it comes to waste management, when it comes to incineration science, and what the main issue is with the incinerator. Having this weekly posting campaign would also be a good way for us to spread our message, spread awareness, fact sheets, debunk myths when it comes to waste to incineration. And as well, we'd like to engage with translators to kind of help spread the message to, you know, the diverse audience that we see in Brampton and in Peel. My own experiences, I was having a conversation with my grandmother the other day about climate change and environmental issues. She's lived here for the past 30 years and she'd never heard of climate change. It was her first time. I thought I failed a little bit because I hadn't had these conversations with her myself. But it was just kind of eye-opening that there really is maybe a bit of a lack of spread of knowledge, and this could be a way, working with translators could be a way of getting the message out to people who might not have already heard anything about it. And next slide, please. The last method of kind of targeting the incinerator, the issue of the incinerator by CCC, is having directed outreach. So we'd like to connect directly with community organizations like the ones that are here today, to kind of work on creating a unified voice for action when it comes to our concerns for the incinerator. We'd also like to target media outlets directly because there hasn't been very much coverage on the issue. And it'd be a great way to kind of spread the message to the general audience, and voice our concerns. And lastly, we'd like to set up meetings with local MPPs to make sure that they're hearing the message that we have so many concerns with this incinerator and we would not like to see carcinogenic pollutants in our local community. So those are the three kind of main ways that CCC is looking to target the incinerator here. And I think our last slide just has, yeah, just where to find CCC online if anyone's curious. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna, now that everybody's back, we should do, I know some people have to jump. We thought we would keep, because the rooms were going, that we kept them going till almost 8 o'clock. We should do a quick report back. Tomisona and I took notes in the other room. I don't know, and we're happy to, I think Tomisona has to go, so I'm happy to report back from my notes. And Amisha, you can supplement if I've missed something. Does anybody from the first group though want to report back first? And yes, Sophia, we can share notes with everybody for sure. Sorry, go ahead, Julian.
Are we the first group?
Yep.
Okay. So this might be a little disorganized, but nonetheless, the main goal is championing our cause at council and putting pressure on politicians from as many angles as possible. We discussed the difference in capacity between municipal, provincial, and federal support of this matter. It appears that at the federal level, they're really making their best effort to check out. But at a local level and at a provincial level, there is our chance and our hope. We had some great wisdom recommend that getting as many people to bring this cause up as possible is essential. So when you're sending an email, think about if you could turn that email into a phone call. The closer your contact, the more meaningful you're playing on human emotion. At the end of the day, our MPPs are also people. They have families that live in the area. They might have kids that go to a daycare nearby. If we can really make it an empathetic ask and not just an angry citizen ask, there is the possibility for positive change to happen. Liz, a legend in fighting incinerators, shared how she addressed the Halton region, Meaford, Niagara, and Southwestern Ontario, and expressed how her approach was, when sending a message, she would also CC everyone else in the party, get as many people on the email chain as possible. We even discussed how effective protesting can be. Protesting outside your local MPP office has a surprisingly effective impact. And that brought us to talking about how young people are an effective tool as well. And maybe this is a question for CCC, how can this be a conversation that's brought up in classrooms? And how can we have the grade 2 to grade 8 voice participating in why they don't want their environment polluted? Could bring up some other things, but I think those are the big ticket items.
Thanks, Julian. Does anyone else from group one want to add anything?
I'll just say that we talked a little bit about councillors, MPPs or MPs in Etobicoke as well. Just speaking up, just creating a little bit more noise and having people, you know, poke their MPP to say that there's going to be people in the surrounding area that are going to be downwind from all of this pollution. So there should be a bit more attention on it. So we can, for those of us who aren't even living in the area, we still have a role to play.
Great. And so if, for those of you in group one, if there was one next step over the summer, what do you think? What should the local groups prioritize over the summer with your support and help?
I don't know if Stephen's here, but I think the main thing is people requesting meetings with councillors and elected officials as close as possible to them. If you know someone, if there's an MPP that has a good connection with a group, and you can reach out to them and request a meeting, and many of us are available to offer support, come along to a meeting, but we really need community people to start those up.
Great. Thanks, Emily. I agreed to do a quick report back because I was taking notes from group two, and then Amisha will add if I miss anything. We started the conversation with about media outreach. It's really important to get the media more engaged. We can make trash sexy, as Maria pointed out. It's a challenge, but we have to try to do it. There is a reporter at the Toronto Star that we should be keeping on our list, Noor Javed, who is covering the GTA. And we should definitely be ensuring that we have a good media list and keeping them in touch. In terms of public outreach, Linda and Wendy shared from their fight in Durham region on the other side of Toronto against the incinerator there. They hosted a big public information session, and they got a lot of people at that session by doing outreach to other groups. And so if there is some interest in a big public information session, we should definitely think about doing that at some point. Maybe that's more of a fall thing, since it's hard to get people out to like garbage events during the summer when they're thinking about holidays and patios and stuff. But it is something we're thinking about. The other thing is lawn signs, fact sheets, and flyers that can go door to door that people can have on their lawns. This would obviously require some fundraising. And Christy shared that we really need to reach out to cancer groups. We talked about the carcinogens that are a byproduct of waste incineration, but a very dangerous element in the community. People who are fighting cancer will not want to see increased carcinogenic load on their communities. And the groups that support cancer survivors would likely want to hear and could even support us on this. So that was a great suggestion. In terms of social media outreach to get youth more engaged, TikTok and Instagram, that's the call out for Community Climate Council to do that as the youth at our resident youth organization. So maybe if there are people excited about social media, that's something to talk about. And other types of community organizations to get them more involved, people who will be concerned about this. We didn't mention it, but workers would be one. Linda did mention, or Wendy mentioned, that they got the support of the local auto workers union in Durham. There are auto workers, there are lots of unions in Peel. Workers know a lot about health and safety. They get poisoned at work. They don't need to be poisoned in their own backyard from the stuff they grow. And speaking of stuff they're growing, of course, gardening associations. We know that this stuff builds up in the soil, it gets into our food. So gardening associations would be another nice thing. And by the way, there's a lot of gardeners on social media, local farmers in Caledon, as Emily points out. So actually trying to find local gardening Facebook groups and social media groups would probably be like a great place to put out the word. The only other thing is, in terms of actual resources that are needed, it does sound like we need a good flyer, that maybe one that can be used on social media for sharing and one that could be printed out and handed out at events. We did not come up with a list of local events in the summer, but I think if Oh, Christy, sorry. I see Christy's hand up and she was in our group. So do you want to add something here?
I forgot to mention the Nextdoor app. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with the Nextdoor app, but it's an app that links communities together and neighbors together. And you post anything from, hey, I've got this thing for sale, or hey, can anybody lend a hand building a deck this weekend with me? Or, you know, I lost my budgie, or there's actually a lot of gardening ladies on there. I'd be happy to do some posting for you guys on the Nextdoor app.
That's fantastic, Christy. Okay, so I think from that point of view, in terms of outreach, probably a similar flyer could be given to the politicians. So we'd be kind of feeding two birds with one seed, as they say. I've put together a very ugly flyer that I gave out at a clothing swap at Brampton last month. I think Emily made a slightly nicer. Oh, Stephen, you have that ugly flyer. Oh my God. I think Emily made a slightly nicer version of it though. It may be too wordy, but I think if people agree that that's a good idea, we could get to work on a bit of a flyer that could be available in July for handing out at events. I would kind of look to the local groups about the suggestions around going to some of the local events like the farmers markets and other local events to see if you can pick a day. And what I'd also like to suggest is that we email an update to the people who attended this and even signed up for this meeting with some possible events that they could join. So I don't know if Brampton Environmental Alliance and Sierra Club Peel might be able to take on putting together a bit of a couple of events that you're planning to attend where you could get other people to come with you. I think now that people have been in this meeting and have seen some of the options come up, they might be willing to come and join you now that they've seen your faces and heard from you. Does that make sense? And then, yes, what the other thing we can do is to share, again, by email, some kind of graphic or something that would be very easy to share on social media on all the groups. And as Christy pointed out, the Nextdoor app, all those places where things can be shared. If everybody in this group gets it and can share it once, that would be fantastic. Does anyone else from group 2 have anything to add?
So I did put in the chat. So the city of Brampton this year has launched a pilot project to create neighborhood associations. And there are certain activities that are allowed. They're giving $1,500 to the associations to spend on getting the neighborhood together. And I just put in the comments that this would be a great place because the community is coming together for things like litter cleanups, picnics, and other activities that are approved under that association guideline. So that would be a great place as well to hand out flyers, or at least to have, instead of handing out flyers, to have one QR code and have some information available and set up a table to be able to talk about what is exactly happening. And the focus, I think, should be where the incinerator is located. That should be the primary focus.
So go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, one other thing, hearing what Christy was saying about the health being so important, of course, this is huge. And the one thing we were able to do was get one local doctor who was quite interested at the time. And we worked with her and we got information together. She circulated petitions. We had 75 Durham doctors sign a petition against the incinerator because we share the same problem that you're sharing in Brampton. Is our air quality is already problematic, and to add pollution wasn't all the doctors completely understood that right away. And so they didn't need to get into too much detail, but that's another thing. If you can find a local doctor or doctors who are willing to do a bit of work. We actually had them do delegations at regional council. So That's it.
Can I ask you a question, Wendy?
Sure.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for sharing that. From sort of start to finish of getting those doctors on board, from the initial conversation to them delegating, what was the time frame for that?
Well, the doctor that was involved with us was very aware of the health concerns with incineration. She read a lot in a short amount of time and was able to, share those concerns with her colleagues, I think when they had local doctor meetings. And that's how it all got rolling. But I think the fact sheets are a great start. One promising thing for you is that there's now a Canada group that has formed. I think, I'm sorry, I missed the beginning of the meeting, but Karen probably talked about it. There's an alliance of people who are all working on zero waste and also are very concerned about incinerators and their emissions. And so there's lots of information now that wasn't available to us. And Zero Waste Europe has done excellent work. And there's so much more information coming forward. So this is promising that you can tap into that. And it's up-to-date information. So there's lots you've got going for you. I think that, for a long time, 80s, 90s, incinerators were shuttered because of the dioxin furan concern. And there weren't new ones built. We were like the second one in North America in like a 20-year period. So there's a bit of an information vacuum there for us at the beginning, but now there's so much. So that's promising for your fight.
Yeah. Thanks, Wendy. I've got Christy and then Linda, and then we should probably wrap up.
I think one great way to get doctors and nurses on board is saying, hey, you know how overcrowded the hospitals in Brampton currently are? Get ready, because they're going to be more crowded. Do you think you can handle that? Because asthma, cancer, whatever else these emissions are going to cause is going to completely overload. I mean, the hospital's already at extreme gridlock most days. I know because I have been ambulanced there several times. And code extreme gridlock is always announced in the morning and in the night. People are on gurneys in the hallways. We can't afford to have any more increase in the amount of people heading to those hospitals. We just don't have the capacity, and those doctors and nurses are going to bear the brunt of that. So it's in their best interest to get involved in this.
Thanks, Christy. Go ahead, Linda.
So I missed the last Canadian Coalition meeting, but Wendy reported to me that I think it was Liz that said that Simcoe is looking at making a decision to possibly send their waste to a Brampton incinerator. And I think it would be very important, especially, with the environmental racism, environmental justice, and just generally to let those councils know that them shipping their crap and having it burned in your backyards is just not on, because these politicians may not have heard that yet. Their staff are not likely to tell them that people in Brampton don't want this. They're dealing with a private company. They may have never had those conversations. So while it's really important to get your Brampton and Peel Region Council involved, and informed and involved so that they are effective, advocates for their residents, I think, whoever's got the ear to the ground in those communities that are contemplating sending their garbage to Brampton, and get in their faces early, because once they sign the contract, very often these contracts can be signed in principle long in advance. of the expansion, that is actually able to accommodate that. And then it becomes hard for these people to back out because, a plan B for them starts to become a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I believe that final decision also in Simcoe gets made at the end of the summer. So aligning, making sure that Simcoe County hears from people in Peel would be a very good idea. Okay, well, I think we should
done.
Go ahead, Amisha.
No, I put it in the chat, but it's already a done deal. They've already finalized. So
that's not what the article. That's not what the article I said. I think it still has to get final council approval in September. So I think there's still a chance to oppose it. And here's the thing. I think the current incinerator can handle the load right now from Simcoe. It won't be a lot, right? It's a rural community. Doesn't include the urban areas of Simcoe County. But if we can stop the expansion and get that incinerator shut down, they won't be able to take the waste. So that needs to be our strategy, right?
And it's telling that in that article, and what we know we've seen in Toronto as well, is that no council wants to vote to build an incinerator in their own backyard. So you just have to remind them that you're just sending it to someone else's backyard, and that's really not fair. And I think the residents of Simcoe that would say, oh, wait, I wouldn't want this being built near me. That's not really fair that I send it somewhere else. I think you can get local community members on side on that as well. Sorry, I know we have to wrap up, Karen.
Yeah, we should wrap up just to let people go because we're over time. But Maria from Gaia has generously offered to make a nice looking flyer using the Gaia templates and probably including some of that the basic stock and trade and information Gaia always shares about how incineration is bad. So I will send her some of this Brampton specific stuff that I put in our ugly flyer that I made. And she can use that to have the local side. I think we will need a call to action for now. So I'm going to ask that she share that with the local groups, with Stephen and Julian and Amisha to figure out, and Sukhpreet, to figure out what needs to be added in terms of the call to action for the flyer. But we'll have that to send back to people. I've taken some notes of this report back so that we can send that back to folks. And what I'm hoping is there'll be a calendar of events that we can send back to folks that people who are in the region can participate in. On recycled paper, that's right, if we print them out. Definitely on recycled paper. Okay, Julian, did you want to close us out?
Very quick comment. Sometimes I find myself discussing with someone who really can't empathize with community members, human health. They're very driven by efficiency and profits. And an effective argument in this case could be, how do you think your commute is going to look with that many more tractor trailers on the road, with a 400% increase in waste coming to the facility? That's actually a considerable amount more traffic in your local area. That's going to slow you down doing anything else you'd like to do. Not even talking about, the emissions of that, just literally the inconvenience of having that many more massive trucks floating around in your neighborhood. It's a nice little extra point that makes people realize that their life will be inconvenienced just beyond the health and the environment.
Thanks, Julian. Great way to finish us out here. So thanks everybody so much for joining us and for staying. For those of you who were able to stay a bit of extra time so that we could get some of these ideas down. We'll send a report back to everyone who attended the meeting, and hopefully a flyer pretty soon that you can share on your social media, and then maybe a calendar of events where you can meet up with people in this group to get the word out in Brampton. Thanks to all the groups that helped co-host and agreed to speak about what they're doing locally. Thanks to Emily as well for coming from Toronto onto this virtual chat. Thanks for Wendy and Linda who came from Durham region, and to Maria who came from Brooklyn. Wow, all the way to this virtual chat from Brooklyn, and for offering to do the flyer. So fantastic. we'll hopefully all meet again soon. I think we should all think about the idea of a public meeting somewhere in Brampton. Sometime in the fall would be fantastic, and we can meet in person and celebrate making waste sexy. That's what we're going to call the next meeting. Making waste sexy.